Well, hello once again, guys. It's been a while since I've done a talkie video, but yeah, I thought that I would start a new segment today. Basically, it's going to be called "Tune Writing Tips with Tory." So, how do you like that alliteration? Um, so yeah, I've noticed like a lot of times I'll come up with an idea for a composition based on some other criteria. Like it'll be, like the certain musical architecture of the piece or some other concept like what I'm about to talk about today, which is the tune I did a video a while back on called 1.618, which is based on the golden ratio. And I just wanted to go. I already promised some people that I was going to do a video explaining what's going on with the tune. Did an intro. It was totally unrelated to what we got going right now. I'm not going to say. I think you know what the chord progression was that I was improvising over from a very famous artist that probably gets copyrighted instantaneously from just the mere mention. But and then throwing in like the Nyan Cat melody over the top of it, and oddly it works because they're both in related keys, too. So one of those things. And see, and there again, that's a songwriting technique in and of itself, is juxtaposing different songs or different elements of different songs. And that's something that I kind of avoid because I just usually have like an original idea or something. But yeah. So anyway, and again, I should go ahead and give credit. Like I actually got the idea to because I like a whole version of that Michael Jackson song. I haven't like the whole thing worked out, but I'm not going to do it because I don't want the video to get copyrighted. But I was actually getting the idea to do that from watching Hadrian Farrow, David Haynes, and some keyboard player that I don't remember do a NAMM show video where they played that as one of their set tunes. Yeah. So anyway, on to the actual content. Tune that I wrote, 1.618. That's the thumbnail for it. It looks like that. Basically, the concept I had was to, like if you look at a spiral seashell, you know that the rings on the inside are tighter and they get bigger as you go towards the outside. So my concept was, originally it was like, I want to write a trio tune, where the lowest outer ring is the bass part, and then the two hands of what I'm doing represent the inner rings, and it's like pitch goes up and the speed increases. That's what I'm trying to say. So I was coming up with these ideas about like, well, how would you represent this in an interesting way, right? So it ended up being a thing like this. Right? So the right hand is the inner part, right? So the left hand is playing the same notes down 2 octaves, twice as slow. So, and then the bass is down an octave from that and is playing the root notes and also other little lines. That's the interesting thing about this particular piece, is that it seems like I keep revisiting it, and I'll do modifications to this tune in particular, and it'll turn into a slightly different thing. And it's sort of morphed into what it is now from what it originally was when I first wrote it. So the challenge on this was to find intervals that not only sound good played separately, because it's kind of boring to have a piece that's just so like I was trying to think of these different intervals to make the tune more interesting. And I came up with this X-Files kind of deal that's like a chromatic shifting. Yeah. Right. And then so I used to play this way up here, but then I've elected to do something a little more Beethoven-ish. And just like have one note out of sync with the pattern. So it's a little less cold and scientific, a little easier to play biologically too. So there's some interior motion. Right? And and I decided to keep the same pattern, but then when it drops down to D flat major 7, right, as before, and then when this shift occurs, when we have the D minor 7 flat 5. And then, of course, the inverted A flat major triad. And it's interesting because you're going back over certain patterns that were in the previous section. So there's the whole theory about like the familiar motivic developments and how, like if every second is a new second in perpetuity, it doesn't have a lot for the listener to latch onto. So, yeah. And then, of course, and then, of course, I have to have a resolution, right? But I wanted to have a sustained kind of sound too. So, we're in A flat major 7, but the right hand is playing the original figure. So, like, there's an interesting interplay going on between the two hands because you have a resolution in the hand by itself, sort of, and then there's the resolution that's taking place in the other hand, and they kind of like match each other and then drift apart a little bit. But the harmony is more going off and on according to the Fibonacci sequence concept, so that it's more interesting to listen to harmonically and less like a science experiment. It's more like a piece of music. And I only do the repetition on that twice, so it kind of like goes twice right back to it. So it's kind of like a surprise cadence. A flat major. And then, of course, from here, I wanted to do, actually, I left off one part, very, very important part, actually. So, also had this idea that, like I like to play with bass players that can hold their own and are good tappers and all that kind of stuff, too. So, like, the bass player could theoretically... Right, so the bass player could play that figure on bass, so which was my left hand and their right hand, and then the fundamental tones with the left or open, and while they're doing that, of course, I take the notes from the melody, right, and turn it into a chord. So, just an interesting change that could take place, so like the next section, we land in getting back to the original point, we resolve to A flat, right? Just thinking about something else. So we landed A flat. So I wanted something that was fairly accessible, but kind of like a hit, back in the pocket groove, kind of indicative of blues, but also kind of old school blues, but also kind of like shuffling a little bit, but also kind of like just a real kind of a laid back funk beat to just solo over, right? So I immediately change it over to like a minor pentatonic type of tonality. So 2. And then, you have your shuffle beats and like the little ghost note drumming patterns and things you can do. Like a Purdy shuffle, Bernard Purdy shuffle type deal. And then of course, whatever the instrument is playing, you could do a million things with that. The door's wide open. You could play chromatic, crazy outside free jazz or chordal harmony or like shred type guitar or blues or like bebop stuff, or just, the point is that you play you write the tune sometimes so that it's easier for the band to be able to create something interesting with it. And since a lot of the stuff I do is, play over changes type stuff, this is a good departure from that. And also a good tune as like, if you bring new people into the group, something to start off with playing, because it's got enough meat to it that it's an interesting piece, but it's also accessible on the improvisation level. And that's a whole other thing, like Keith Jarrett, I think, said in an interview before I was reading, like one of his strengths is programming the concert. As a band leader or songwriter or composer, you have to make decisions about the content that it's good to be like that. You have the mentality or the talent to be like a Frank Zappa that's got, I'm going to write uncompromising music that's impossible to play. Haha, everyone. But the sad, more realistic truth is that a good composer writes music that I guess people would want to hear, but also that the band can play. In his case, they could play it, obviously, and he knew how to make it happen. But for most of us, we don't need to be thinking along those lines. More practical, but with creative twists that make things more interesting, from a musical and creative standpoint. And then of course, the tail end of that, of each solo, if you had multiple solos, you could go playing a double figured version, a double length bar version of those chords, I'm just kind of playing a little light improv over that. And here's another interesting point. A lot of times when I come up with it just depends on the situation. Like if I know I'm going to improvise on something, I just kind of strategize it out. Okay, so I know, for example, on the video version that I did for YouTube, I've got a monitor over there in case you wonder why I keep looking. The video YouTube version of that I just did, I was thinking I was just going to play like a rock solo, and I was going to play a lot of notes, rock, fusion, jazz kind of a thing, whatever you want to call it. And I knew I was going to play a lot of notes, so in that particular case, that perfectly outlines the chord. Like, you don't need to hear sounds like a ukulele. Like, maybe that was, see, there again, I come up with a crazy screwball idea. Like, have a ukulele part, in there playing those chords would be interesting, or whatever, like, oh shit, what if we had a mandolin playing the high version of that repetitive figure, whatever. The point is, if somebody else wants to cover the tune, hey, do it and send me the link. I want to hear it. But anyway, like a lot of times I'll come up with an alternate, way to do the harmony or do comping for it. So in most cases, I never made my point. Like in most cases, like, I'll know that the higher voicings will work, and it's kind of a start-stop thing. Especially if I'm in this area a lot, I like to reinforce that register. This is an improv thing, not really a composition thing. And I guess the tune writing tip, of course, here in this particular instance of this song is to just think outside the box creatively about anything, geometry, math, or whatever. You don't have to put every single idea in one tune either. Okay, like I watched this King Crimson concert really amazing show. Like all the tunes were amazing. Everybody was playing amazing, and just sound was amazing. It was perfect. Like it's from my favorite era of the band and all that. And like I was just thinking about Robert Fripp and like their whole creative process that they do as a band. Very reminiscent of like sort of like Chick Corea Electric Band in a different way, or even Dream Theater, but they're coming from a different headspace, as a group when they write. Do you know what I mean? Like they have these things in their music where they do the two guitars overlapping. Anyway, I'm not playing anything in particular of theirs. It's just the texture idea that they employ is like the two guitars interlocking together in different ways. I think that's a very great idea as a compositional tool, a way to and it's something that people have not really done, and that's like the essence of progressive rock, but without going to metal town. Not that there's anything wrong with heavy metal and all that. It's just, when I've always wanted it to hear a band like that anyway, up until I discovered them, like it was the idea of like, here's a progressive kind of a art rock, modern group, but it's not metal all the time. It's like the focus is on songwriting or different ideas that are coming from like classical kind of jazz, avant-garde things, as opposed to like the heavy riffs in that whole scene, which that stuff's amazing and those guys are great. But me personally, the desire to, hear this other type of thing. So that sometimes it's non-tangible is what I'm trying to say. This is all of it. This whole thing is about like getting inspiration from a non-tangible source, something that's not directly itself musical, even though the overtone series conforms to the golden ratio, as does the color spectrum and nature and biology and the planet and the solar system and the galaxy. That's a whole other thing, though. Like why that exists. Maybe an astrophysicist or a cosmological thinker besides myself, but someone qualified to expound upon it could go into detail about that. Anyway, back to the point. So sometimes I will comp different ways. So like instead of there, maybe like this. Yeah. So and the main reason for that is to just basically if I'm playing this piece like as a solo guitar piece, I don't really want to be playing improvising all the time because of sonorities, maybe on one chorus or something. I would want to comp up here or something. Maybe I want to be down here also because I want to play more lyrical lead lines that are in this range of the guitar, or something. it's got a whole different feel. You know, it's still a lot of the same notes though. And then right there, you know, so I'm already kind of changing the harmony. You can hear out the related similarities. Fun to do, but that's like a whole kind of polyphonic thing, you know, like a theory or whatever. That's kind of the side issue for what we're trying to talk about here. But yeah, I think that's pretty much just about sums it up. I highly suggest going and watching the video. It's not really gotten a whole lot of attention. I understand YouTube's really more of a place, it seems like, for a lot of artists or YouTubers to talk about things, not necessarily present original music. Or maybe it's just not that great. I don't know. But that's not really the point, you know. Like I'm not really trying to write. And say the other thing about this too, I say tune writing tips. Understand that I'm not telling you necessarily things that are going to make you shoot to the top of the charts, or the top 40 here or something. It's more like creative ideas on how to expand your palette as a composer, so that you have more guns in your arsenal to work with, you know, as opposed to just doing what you normally would do with the knowledge you already have. Yep, so don't forget to like and subscribe, of course, and I hope you've enjoyed it, and I will catch you on the next one.